Welcome, everyone. We're just going to wait for a couple minutes just to make sure that everyone gets into the panel. So we will be right with you. Okay, I think we're at a good number of people. Welcome to our very first virtual thesis show 2020 at the MFA Design for Social Innovation program at the School of Visual Arts. I'm Mia Osaki. I'm the chair of DSI. I go by she, her pronouns. And thank you so much, everyone. It's really incredible to see how many people are filing into our Zoom today. We hope that you're all safe and healthy and your communities are doing well. First off, I want to congratulate this amazing class of thesis presenters, this panel, and all of the students who are graduating for your hard work and energy during a really, really challenging time. It's important in times like this that we do things like gather and come together. This is why this program is so important. DSI was founded by the amazing Cheryl Heller nearly 10 years ago, whose vision was to teach the capacities and capabilities of social design to students so that they can learn to address the complex problems that they care about. And faced with this complexity right now, you'll see that our students are putting into practice everything that they've learned so far, and really in the last couple of months have really put these powers to test. They're designing their way through uncertainty and ambiguity. They're working in collaboration as a community with partners, with those with lived experience, even though we were online for the last 8 weeks. They've learned and they've been testing out how to reframe problems and look at our systems to find opportunities. And they're questioning, they're always thinking critically and imagining how things could be better. And these students are ready to engage and make a difference in this world. And this thesis show is an amazing example, as it was co-designed by them. When asked what they wanted to do, this is what they wanted to bring to the world. They wanted to start conversations again and get re-engaged with the world. So you'll see what they can do. We're so impressed and proud of you all. Before we get started, I just wanted to introduce the next 2 days. This is the first of 4 panels. We'd like to thank Hilary Sedovic from the Creative Reaction Lab, Razmia Kermani-Fry from the Fund for Public Housing, Sloan Leo from the Vague Group, and our extraordinary instructor, our beloved Karen Proctor, for inspiring us and leading the way in these panels over the next couple of days. And we're excited to continue with them as our future partners. If you want to see more about our brilliant students who are graduating, we have a very special website where you can see their work and learn more about them. So we'll put this in the chat. It's going up right now. It's dsi.sva.edu/thesis-2020. That's a mouthful, but you should be able to find it, and you can follow along. You can read about the students, you can watch their videos, and just hear more about their projects. We have a hashtag, it's DSI Thesis 2020, if you want to post. We also encourage you to join the rest of the panels today and tomorrow. So this first panel theme is on building equitable and regenerative systems. And so today, the format of the panel will start with about 10 minutes of introductions from our fantastic moderator, Hilary Sedovic from the Creative Reaction Lab, and our graduating students who you see on the panel. 25 minutes of panel discussions where the students will talk about this theme of building equitable and regenerative systems and how it applies to their thesis work and how they've done these incredible projects over the last year and a half. We'll do 10 minutes of Q&A from the audience. So I'm sure you all are adept at using Zoom now, but there's a button at the bottom and you're welcome to contribute your Q&A questions as we go, and we will hold time at the end and read out your questions. And we'll do 5 minutes of closing statements. So those are the format for the panel. I started out at DSI last summer as chair. I've been at DSI for about 4 years as a thesis advisor, so I know this process very well, and this is always a very special emotional time. But last summer, my timing was amazing because one of the first activities I participated in was a boot camp by the Creative Reaction Lab. And as a human-centered designer, it blew my mind and turned my world upside down. I'd always designed collaboratively, but really learning how to design with rather than simply for people with lived experience so that we can create more equitable and caring collaborations has just become the foundation of our semester and our year at DSI after following that workshop. And so we were so excited to have Creative Reaction Lab today. Hilary Sedovic, I'm going to let you introduce yourself, and we're so lucky to have you moderate this panel. So take it away. Enjoy the panel today, everyone.
Thank you so much, Mia. I'm so pleased to be here. It feels like a privilege to be able to be alongside these students virtually and to be able to support them presenting their projects to you. As Mia said, my name is Hilary Sedovic. I'm the Learning and Education Manager for Creative Reaction Lab. We are a nonprofit organization based in St. Louis, Missouri, founded in response in the aftermath of the uprising in Ferguson after the killing of Mike Brown Jr. in 2014. Our mission is to educate, train, and challenge Black and Latinx youth to become leaders designing healthy and racially equitable communities. In my role, I design and facilitate workshops historically across the continent, currently working to pivot as we learn to do in an innovative space in the midst of the pandemic, and figuring out how do we continue to meet people's learning needs in this space. So I'm really excited to introduce the rest of our panelists here to share their projects with you today. Go ahead.
Thanks, Hilary. Thank you, Mia. So, hi, my name is Maurice. My personal pronouns are she, her, and hers. Just a little bit of background. Originally, I was trained in fashion design, but I have a personal obsession with waste. I guess as a designer, I just see garbage as a design flaw. And so wanting to do that work and work on big systemic problems, but still maintain my identity as a designer and my skill set as a designer is what brought me to DSI.
Hi everyone, I'm Tianyue Zhang, and my personal pronouns are she, her, hers, and you can also call me Caroline. I'm a designer trained in sociology, so I'm passionate about using like design and art to communicate a better story of people's day-to-day lives. And the project that Tara and I launched, Pretty Ugly, deal with fashion, waste, and consumption. And our premise is that there is a lot of talk about like sustainability in fashion space, while the negative impacts like waste, pollution, climate change, like they are increased. And it would seem that for all its power, fashion now is a system that makes things for people to mostly throw away. And there must be like misunderstanding about what we think the aim of sustainability is supposed to do. So Tara, would you like to continue?
And then because of the scope of this topic, we developed a unique strategy for our work. So central is our core philosophy, and that is that there is no garbage in nature. From that space, which is sort of the backbone, the spine of our project, we work in 3 distinct areas. So our work spreads out into communication, education, and mobilization. That approach allows us to be very focused on this specific industry and issue, but the work itself can spread out and cover a lot of ground. So we're able to teach, we're able to generate content, and ultimately move people towards action. It also plays to Caroline and my personal strengths as makers, as artists, and storytellers. So while we've done a lot of work, the aim of this project, in short, is to be able to build the capacities in people that move them towards a redesign of the built world or the man-made systems that are all around us that are more in line with the systems of nature. So you'll hear us talk a lot about systems of man and systems of nature and closing the distance between those two in our work. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Catherine Mazzocchi, going by the pronouns of she, her, hers. I'm a New Yorker and Italian-American committed to crafting experiences and opportunities where community voice and power are centered in decision-making processes to create more equitable governance structures. My practice places emphasis on equity, justice, and visual storytelling.
Hi, everyone. Worked along with Catherine. My name is Jennifer Ulloa, and I'm a first generation, my pronouns are she, her, hers, and I'm a first generation New Yorker and Salvadoreña committed to fighting for racial equity. So as a researcher, educator, and community design strategist, my work really centers around building joy, well-being, and power in communities of color, and aiming to really design equitable decision-making processes so that we can create the transformative anti-racist policies that we need and the liberating futures that we dream of. Over the past year, Catherine and I have had the privilege of working with WeAct and have become part of the WeAct family. WeAct has been a leader in the environmental justice movement since 1988, and we've had the incredible opportunity to work alongside them and the Northern Manhattan community. And together with WeAct, we've designed Power is Local.
So Power is Local is a framework for equitable policy development to move community-based organizations towards greater community ownership. In this context, we use the term community ownership to describe the opportunity for community members most vulnerable to the climate crisis, health disparities, and energy insecurity to define and lead what policy change looks like in their communities. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Tianyue. My personal pronouns is she, her, hers. And I'm a social designer with a passion for creating conversations around sustainability. And you guys can call me Sky.
Yeah, hi, I'm Wang, and you can call me Cecilia. I go by she, her, hers, and I'm also a social designer and a practitioner of empathy in design to narrow the gaps between the user and in the trust difficult environment.
So we've been working on a project around the issues of overconsumptions of college students in China. And this project is mainly helping them to recognize and identify the problems they are facing and take actions by changing their consumption behavior. And by doing that, we've worked with our partners Zhang and environmental nonprofit organizations to host some workshop for college students to challenge their behaviors in order to save our environment.
Yes, and the key point is people consume not to feel things, but to feel their hearts. So we want to engage them to recognize their shopping habits are driven by insecurity and a false sense of self-worth through the workshops. And this is us, and this is our project, Desire and Reality. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jiangyi. You can call me Joy. My personal pronouns is she, her, hers. Before coming to DSI, I'm a packaging and a communication designer. Sarah and I were as a thesis partner working on the waste problem area. We saw that more and more people care about this problem, but they are powerless to this problem too. During our research, we found that most people think recycling is the best way to solve this problem. Yeah, and yes, we think recycling is good, but you can see in our video, we show that actually recycling system has lots of limitation that people don't know. So our thesis try to get people to think outside recycling and help them to find a better way to apply in their daily lives. So Sarah, do you want to talk about more?
Hi, I'm Huang. I go by pronouns she, her, her. You can call me Sarah. I'm happy to be here. So briefly about myself, before I came to DSI, I studied in product design, but I think design can be, I want to design more than commercial and beautiful things, and that's why I came here. I'm interested in children, education, and environmental issues. And to the future, I want to keep tackle the intersection of this field as same as our thesis did. So like Joy said, we start from trying to address the waste crisis, and where we land is we work with school, because the school we made did a great job on teaching kids how to do recycling. But we, like Joy said, we know that there is no single method can manage all our nation's garbage. So what we did is we created an educational play program for kids, not just teach them this knowledge about environmental issue, but also help them understand their ability toward the environment, and also empower them to make positive environmental impacts in their homes, schools, and community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much for introducing yourselves and your projects. We'll move into some questions now. So to start, at Creative Reaction Lab, we work on this foundational belief that oppressive and inequitable and unequal systems are by design, therefore we can redesign them. And the way that we aim to do that at Creative Reaction Lab is through the framework that we've pioneered, equity-centered community design. And so that's really the lens through which we do a lot of our work. With this panel being about building equitable and regenerative systems, I'm curious to know from each of your groups what the guiding vision is of your work. What are you working toward?
Do you want me to, I'll jump in first. So kind of those two ideas of equity, I think we tend to think about, for Caroline and I, we have a different approach to equity. So I think the first thought on equity is that it's sort of at this ground level, that there's equity among people. There's parity, and we're seeking equity among people. And we've kind of opened up the frame to say that there's another character in this play, which is nature, and that there's an equitable relationship between people and nature. And so we see equity as a balance between those two things, which are currently at an imbalance. So that's how we approach equity. Our guiding principle is really this thing that we'll keep coming back to, which is that there is no garbage in nature, which is not just a thought experiment. It's really that nature is a perfect system where there is no waste, there is no garbage. Every part is utilized. Every part is dependent on the success of every other part. And that the systems of man, and as we behave in the man-made world, is at odds with that. So we're seeing equity as rebalancing man and nature.
Yeah, and in addition, what Tara just said, like from the very tiny level, I think we understand like the equity is for fashion, how the like good or better like fashion looks like. It's not the like luxury, or it's not a better or substantial purchase for people. So that's what the tiny level within the equity in fashion would look like.
I guess to bounce off of that, I think in a similar vein for us, since we're working in the context of the environmental justice movement, the guiding, I guess, foundation for what we're trying to do, I think, is under this idea of a just transition, which basically is this like core principle, process, practice of environmental justice that aims to move us from extractive economies to regenerative economies, and defining regenerative as both like being cooperative and moving from exploitation to cooperation. It also involves like to the nature part, like ecological and social well-being, deepening democracy. So all those are kind of interconnected. And I think that the other guiding foundation for us is this spectrum of community engagement to community ownership, which came from movement strategy and Rosa Gonzalez specifically. And it's this idea of how do we move from simply engaging community members, if we're even doing that, and kind of involving people and maybe listening to them, to communities really taking the lead and being able to decide how decisions are made, what the process is in and of itself. And that to us, I think it's central to equity. Catherine, I don't know if you want to add anything else to that.
Yeah, just very short quote from the creators of the Just Transition Framework. They write that transition is inevitable, justice is not. So I think if we're going to do this the way that I don't know, makes has an equitable format and brings justice to all people, then we need to have that equity-centered lens on it.
Yeah, can I jump in? Cool.
Yeah.
So I want to talk about our thing, equity and regeneration. I think regeneration, we all have different definition of it, but for me, regeneration is like a life cycle. It's like iterating process, but not just change, but leverage. We'll keep thinking, how can we leverage this system? Like our project, we are not propose a brand new curriculum for school, but we enrich the education they already have.
Yes, and can I jump in now? Okay, because our project is also about the overconsumption things, and we want to solve this problem from the bottom to up. So we are focused on the individual levels, and we also want to solve this in a cycle process. So the main purpose of our project is about the regeneration too, and obviously overconsumption will cause the waste, and which is on the opposite of the sustainability. And what we did is to create a process and engage the young people to understand themselves, because we want to change their own self-value, and then they can clarify the needs and wants. And when they clarify it, it will rebuilding their self-values and influence their actions. And when they act more, they will also reinforce their values, and it will become a cycle. And yeah, so this is how we regenerative this. Yeah.
So we kind of see this like equity as like a regenerative cycle, so everyone can take part into this process.
Thank you. That's a great segue as well, Sky. So Mia spoke a little bit to the importance of including people with lived experience, and we refer to those folks as living experts, oftentimes because we see in attempting to address community issues, experts with a capital E from academia or professional spheres are called in to provide insight and direction, and instead are in those who have living expertise, having experience with the issue, are looked to more as research subjects, only brought in to give feedback at little parts, or maybe only seeing the end delivery of the product. And so I'm curious to know a little bit more from you all about what you've learned about collaborating or centering with those with lived experience.
Who wants to go first on this one? So for Caroline and I, one of the issues when you're dealing with fashion is that there's no president of fashion. Fashion is global, it's disaggregated. It involves design houses, suppliers, a supply chain, retail locations. So it's just sort of this like amorphous, headless thing that covers the globe, and it's incredibly extractive. So when you're looking for the community that you want to work with, those communities are lots of different constituencies that involve both brands, consumers, and then also government plays a role in terms of legislation or regulation. In our work, one thing that we discovered that ended up being kind of pivotal to the work we did was the under-leveraged role of the designer. Fashion is a creative industry, and in fashion, sustainability has mostly shifted into the areas of either supply chain or marketing to answer the needs of sustainability. And so then you have this whole creative component of the industry that's not being leveraged. And what people haven't, what we discovered in our work was that people have feelings about that. Designers have feelings about that. Designers don't typically learn about sustainability in school. It's not really taught yet, not yet. And so then they start their careers, they love fashion, then they become designers, and then through the course of doing their job, they learn about the impacts of their career on the environment. And that's really hard. That can be really difficult. And so that discord between how you feel and the work that you love, and the distance, again, the distance between those two, there's a lot of tension in that. And so that space about the role of the designer and how to leverage designers and how to amplify designers' voices is really key and foundational to our work.
Yeah, and also I think, just as Tara said, like designers, they have like emotions, they have their attitude toward the issue, and it's really important for us to show their collective power and use like mapping or design it, like the skills we have to help them to realize what's happening right now and what the power and barrier they are facing. And I think that's an important role for us to do, and the learning we have from them.
And like designers.
Yeah, I think for Jen and I's work, like she mentioned in our intro, we've been working with We Act and the Northern Manhattan community for over a year now. Learning, it's been really awesome to see them shape our knowledge of who they are, what their community is, what they love about their community, the solutions that they want, instead of having someone else dictate kind of what their life is supposed to be or what it should be, quote unquote. And hearing that they want to go deeper than these Band-Aid fixes that people keep giving them. When you talk to some of these community members, people are really talking about systems. People are really excited. I think one of the things that I've heard that's been the most grounding for me is I had a community member say that people just keep dropping in, taking photos and leaving. At a very basic level, I think for us, it's been about, how do we not do that? How can we bring community members so far into the work so that it's a real partnership, there's real collaboration, so that when we graduate in 2 weeks, we can still come around and say hello and be friendly, but the work really lives on through them. That's the durability piece of the work. It's not for us, it's for them.
Yes.
And they built that. And I think that's super exciting.
Anyone from Rebuilders or Design Reality?
Yes, I can share something. So like, as you guys know, we collaborate with school, work with kids, and in the past 5 years, those kids really showed us they're so adorable, and they really show us they're patient, and they are really desire to contribute even they are still kids. Like, so what we did, we decide curriculum, but more than that, we are just provide the environment where they can use their power to rebuild the value of waste, like our project's name. So like, teach them how to fish, not give them fish. So we don't want to offer the fish, but teach them the ability of fishing.
Yeah, can I add something here? Because this resonates me a lot, because Tara and I had done an event which is called the Mending Lab. It's really, it's basically one event for people to learn the skills of mending clothes, but the philosophy and the idea we want to convey is help them to understand the zero waste and how to make better use of the clothing they already have. And also it is like, at the beginning, we bring our kindness to the space, and we also receive a lot of encouragement and kindness back. That's really very nice experience.
I mean, I think that's one of the unique capacities that social designers have, is it's almost like, as you send out the invitation is how people show up and how they come back to you. And I think that's maybe a difference in the process of this work and what we're taught at DSI and how we want to approach the world, is really enter from a space of curiosity and learning, as opposed to telling and parachuting in. And as Catherine was saying, like, it's not about like coming in and telling somebody what they need. It's really just being patient and curious and listening. So much of the work, I know for all of us, because, you know, we all know each other's projects, so much for all of us has just been kind of slowing down and really listening. And once you ask a question, like waiting for that answer to come back to you. Because often it's not what you think it is. The answer isn't really what you think it is.
Yes, and because our project is focused on those college students, and through our interview, we found that our college students are misstanding the regional consumption first and the equivalent to buying cheap goods. So they're more likely to be attracted by the discounts. And then when they find something are wasted, and they will feel guilty and want to change their habits. But both of their parents and our society cannot give them a solutions to solve the real problem. And so at first we are just think the real problem is how to teach them and how to educate them and how to tell them what is the rational consumptions. But when they go deep in this crisis, and we find that the real thing is students don't want to face themselves. Actually, what they need is to make them feel valuable and make them feel loved. And they use the consume to realize their self-worth. So when we find these problems, everything goes clearly and we change our directions too.
Yeah, and also like since like college students are like at an age of like building their identity and seeking for community and love and belongingness, I believe like every group are also like a lot of people are seeking for the community are coming into. Yeah.
Thank you. So we've spoken a little bit about recognizing the systems as they currently are, and then what it looks like to redesign them. And when we look at how systems have been designed, we recognize that there's such a depth of history, both beneficial and harmful, that has led us to this point. We think of, at Creative Reaction Lab, think of design as both the intent and unintentional impact behind an outcome. Because if we only focus on intent, then we step out of any kind of accountability for the outcome. And so when we think about history, especially as it relates to your issue, I'm curious to know what some of the unintended consequences might be of your interventions or approaches.
Let me start. There's almost two parts to your question, Hilary. First is the history part. Caroline and I talk a lot in our project about sort of this shift from after World War II into a consumptive model as the underpinning of the economy, global economies of the Western world. And that shift has been pretty gradual, but really in fashion has sped up in the last 20 years, this amplified consumption model, and also like the extractive nature of fashion, which is really just a symbol for all other kinds of consumer goods. And so that's kind of the historical part that we've sort of like slid into this without a lot of decision making. It just, you know, it sort of happened, but now we're here.
Yeah, and it's also important for us to understand the volume and the scale of the problem. It's really big, and it's a like complicated system, impacts a lot of like different parts. And I think people can, if interested, can watch our video because we have really nice visuals about the history part of the like this issue.
And so like where we are is sort of an unintended consequence, but then also if we solve the problem, there's you know, the unintended consequence of that is that millions of people around the world make their living by being workers in this system. So if we succeed, then what are those jobs? What do those jobs look like? And that's not a question that we have answered yet. Is there a way for fashion to be not extractive and not pulling things out of, not pulling raw materials out of the world? Is there a way that the actual process of making fashion can be regenerative? I mean, that's a big idea. But that's the only way you can deal with the fact that you have millions of people around the world that really rely on their daily incomes. And you can see what we're dealing with now as supply chains break down. It's devastating for people because these are their jobs and these are their livelihoods. So that's the part in when you take a systemic approach and you take a big look at it. Touching on this problem is not easy for all of us. It's not easy because there are other, we've constructed a world where people's livelihoods depend on us continuing to behave as we are.
Yeah, I think that for us, like the history is again like grounded in the environmental justice movement and environmental racism, which is basically the fact that like Black, Latinx community members, communities of color are more likely to be living in neighborhoods that have toxic facilities that lead to higher rates of pollution, higher rates of health disparities like asthma, other like respiratory, cardiovascular like illness. And a lot of that it's like heavy and goes back, way back to like to redlining, to housing segregation that's led to like disinvestment in communities, right? Just like racist policies. It like goes back real deep. I think to your question around like unintended consequences, for us, like it's everything that we've learned. Again, like EJ, the environmental justice movement like goes back, like we can see like Indigenous folks like being at the core of this. A lot of the time it's attributed to the civil rights movement. And like that's played a really big role in like shaping the environmental justice movement. I think for us, environmental justice like means something like in the context of like Northern Manhattan and New York City versus like in Memphis, Tennessee. For us, like all the things that we've learned are specifically in the context of an urban space too. So the issues of urban heat island effect and like urban areas like becoming hotter because of, like literally like just like dark smet, and like the specific context of like Northern Manhattan is like what we've learned. And I think maybe an unintended consequences, like having this framework and maybe other people trying to utilize it, but using it in the same like context. And I think that like what the ideas that we have that we're proposing that like we've created like with We Act, it's recognizing that that's like location specific to a certain extent. The principles I think are all, important and the same, but what that looks like depending on like what your space is different. So yeah. Catherine, I don't know if you want to add in anything to that, but.
No, I think you got it. I think, yeah, also understanding that we worked with very specific preconditions for our work, working with an organization that is a leader in the EJ movement. There's a lot of preconditions that they have. They have a base, they have the capacity to move, large amounts of people. So taking that all into consideration, like Jen was saying, when you, as a user, kind of adapt and, pull apart the pieces of the framework that are applicable to you and your place.
Rebuilders or desiring reality?
Yeah, I'll just hop in. So for us, like, it's pretty different. Like our base is more like a Chinese cultural for our project, and consumerism has like only emerged in the past 10 years for us. So it's a pretty new things. And the background does have like a great influence of our project, and how like people are really like hardly understanding the meaning of money, and which there's like a lack of educational educations for the college students. And yeah, and that like that history, and it's pretty short, and it's flat and it affect a lot of like college students right now. Yeah.
Yeah, and for this one, like another important thing is also influence our parents, and those parents not know how to educate their children. Like our parents hope to conduct a consumption education for those children only by regulating the amount of financial assistance. So this makes the children think cheap is a good buying strategy and have no resistance when faced with the discounts from the machines. And also, on the other hand, our parents tend to compare their children with their peers' children, and this subconscious reinforce the students they are more focused on the comparison. And when students have a sense of comparison, we cannot ask them to compare only for their grades and not their consumptions.
I just want to jump in and thank Hilary for this question, because I'm just like looking at all our faces on the screen. And I think when you think about the EJ movement, you're thinking about those were intended practices, like systems designed and intended to oppress people. But when you're looking at fashion and you're looking at Joy and Sarah and packaging, to me, those are two very tangible examples of no designer creates with the intent of these horrible effects, right? No one creates packaging and says, yeah, like this is going to end up in a landfill. Cool. So I think those are two very interesting examples. So I think Joy wants to jump in. Yeah.
Yes. Our thesis focus on the waste problem because I remember as I was a packaging designer in the school, one of the things our classmates always discuss is how to make this packaging attractive and more attractive. You know, of course, there have some some skills here, like telling a good story for the packaging, or have a good concept, or even use a lot of luxury or fresh materials on the packaging. So, but one day when my friends and I was working on the street and we saw a bunch of empty box in the road, we laugh it and we just say, oh, that's cool box is our design. And that feels so bad, you know. I think, in fact, as a designer, we often have such complex emotions here. And we think we should be the one to solve the problem rather than the one to create the problem. So, of course, we already solved some problem, like we satisfy the people's desire for beautiful packaging, or make some products easy to sell. I think that's maybe same to Tara and Caroline's project. Is fashion is the same things, but I just think that's really what our social needs or what we can do as a social designers. That's, I think, as a designer is powerless, and most people powerless of people in face of various desires. Yeah, that's.
And part of that is like not knowing how things are made or where they come from or where they go. It's just not having that understanding of like the systemic nature of everything. Sorry, Mia.
Yeah, no. That was a great ad. Well, thank you. I want to move to some Q&A because there's a really good one, I think, related to where we're at right now in the conversation. But I want to encourage the audience there's a Q&A button at the bottom. If you want to add your questions, we'll get to as many as we can. We'll spend about 10 minutes. Rashid from Transdisciplinary Design at Parsons, the MFA program there, put in a question about, there's a longer comment, but I'll just read the question. In your work, so we've been talking about the designer and the role of the designer in these social design projects. In your work, have you explored the concept of ownership and how design for social innovation should approach ownership of ideas, of your processes, and ultimately of social good? Where do you position yourselves? Great question.
That's a really good question. So Caroline and I have this weird thing that we experience: the more we give away, the more we get back, which is kind of not how designers are trained. Like, we're trained to sort of hold things. And weirdly, in our work, at least, it feels like the more you give, the more that comes back. So I think for us, we try not to hold on too much.
Yeah, and I also realize it's really a tough question, and I think the project differs a lot in like different situations. And I know, like, Catherine, your and Jen's project are different. Maybe you can talk about your approach about this.
Yeah, I mean, so this is like the central part of our project and our work with WeAct. To us, like, ownership, it's both, again, like that idea of like moving from just engaging community members. So like, what does that mean? It's like asking people, like, what do you think about this? And then from there, like, us, I guess, as like designers, researchers, whatever we want to call ourselves, making final decisions on what that thing is, as opposed to seeing ourselves as facilitators. Like, we're coming into a space and like facilitating a conversation so that again, like, in the context of us, like, I'll speak for us, so that, you know, Northern Manhattan, which I know we didn't like preface this in the beginning, but that's like East, Central, West Harlem, Inwood, Washington Heights, just context for folks. But so that for us, like, ownership, that means like we are facilitating a workshop in which community members are talking to one another, and like, to us, like, we're listening, we're a part of the discussion, but more like asking the questions and like creating the space so that people feel comfortable talking through, like, these are the issues that I'm facing. Like, this is what extreme heat looks like in my building, in my neighborhood. Like, this is what my experience is with that. Like, these are the challenges that I face. Like, this is what I want to do about it. And then I think that, like, to the ownership piece, it's then, okay, not just that first initial part of like cool communities getting to like define what the issue is. Then when we go into the solution, for us, it's really been around like we have like a strategy committee that we've been working with, but like working with people from like the DOH, working from the office, OEM, Office of Management and Emergencies, like working with, I guess, like what Hilary was saying before, these like what you would consider subject matter experts, also with community members who we consider subject matter experts because they know the ins and outs of what their life experience is, plus like the work that they do outside. So being not just in the same space, but like their voice meaning just as much as like all those other people, and shaping what's the direction that we're taking with this policy around extreme heat. Like when we're talking about, so for us, like we did a lot of like work around this idea of like energy insecurity. So it's basically this like phenomena of like people not being able to like adequately meet energy needs. So in the context of extreme heat, like it's real hot outside and like I can't afford to pay my energy bill, or I already have existing health conditions, and like on top of not being able to pay for this, I don't have air conditioning, my health worsens. Like, what do we do about that? There's policy that already exists and programs to fund like air conditioning. I guess to the core of it is really you're having like community members get to define what the problem is and how they want to solve it, and being in the space with like decision makers is, yeah, the key for us.
Hilary, I'm interested if Creative Reaction Lab talks about ownership and how you approach that too in your work.
Sure, definitely. I mean, we certainly see ourselves as facilitators, not just in our workshops, but in supporting specifically our youth program. You know, how do we equip people with the tools that they need to dismantle inequitable systems? And in the end, sustainability is going to come from community ownership. Because especially if we have people coming in and providing, quote, solutions, which I put quotes around that, we don't use that word. Solutions feels very silver bullet, and these are complex issues. We need multiple interventions and approaches to dismantle them. And so when we have people coming in and dropping off what they feel are solutions and not owning the outcome, that's not a sustainable thing. Whereas if it is something that is generated within the community, then they also are going to be the ones who are seeing the effects of it and able to make changes for continuous improvement as it moves along. And so for us, ownership really belongs with the community, and those who may be called into support as, you know, design allies, then they can support that moving forward if requested. If they are requested to leverage their power and access to help that move forward, great. But otherwise, community, they are the equity designers.
Also to that, I love that so much, Hilary, and like that brings up like another thought is, I think core too to this project for us has been that piece on capacity building, and to what Catherine was saying before, that this framework, like this process really like sits with the community members. Like how is it that, you know, a community member will lead, like for our workshops, there were community members that were leading the facilitations with other community members, because like they had already gone through the environmental health, justice, and leadership training that We Act has. So part of also what this framework has been is like proposing like mini training, so more community members feel comfortable with facilitation, like public speaking, feel confident in knowing like what the political process is and ways in which like they can affect change. So yeah, to the point of like community members leading that and part of ownership, I think part of that is like the capacity building.
Okay, so I wanted to read out a comment. It's not so much a question, but it's from Sakona. They say, I'm a nonprofit professional who's intrigued by the design space and deeply want to pivot into this space. An underlying theme of all of the projects seem to be centering around inclusion, equity, justice, and collaboration at the center of problem solving. So, you know, I think that's a great wrap up to that question. We probably have time for maybe one or two more. So I'm just going to read through one that's specifically for Sarah and Joy in your project. What is the most challenging thing in the process of your thesis work?
About it?
You can talk first.
Okay, I mean, there's a lot of challenges. I don't know where I should start. So one of the things I think it is also important for our project is engagement. Not just kids, but also the school, teachers, and the parents, especially parents, because we don't have chance to contact with them directly. So at the end, what we did is we wrote a letter to parents and let them know what we are doing, why it is important. So engagement.
And you know, our field is not education part. So Sarah and I have no experience for the education people.
Yes, and yeah, we're not teachers and we don't have kids either.
Yeah, we know the kids' hobbies or something like that. So that's a challenge for us.
Yeah, access is always a challenge in these thesis projects. And then we realized that we have so many stakeholders, right? Like we thought it was one stakeholder, and then it's, you know, the ecosystem is very big. So you've all learned how to navigate that. There's one more question. If we didn't get to your question, we will save these and we'll allow we'll send them over to the thesis students and they can respond as well. So thank you for these. Lisa writes, how do you see influencing retail CEO boards, shareholders about changing success metrics? Today, increased sales, units sold, margins are metrics that leaders expect to see growth. So if we want retailers to embrace these ideal, necessary concepts, how do we change these success drivers? So around metrics, and it sounds like it might be directed closer to desire and reality and pretty ugly, but anybody can jump in.
I can go first, but Tara, you can add whenever you want. So like at the very beginning, Tara and I found that the problem is so big, and if we want to push like brands to make change, they cannot be pushed like one spot, but actually we have government, we have brands, and also we have consumers, and they organically like affect each other. So we have to put them like all different ways.
And definitely I would, and Sky and Cecilia will talk about this as well. And I would invite everyone to take a look at our video, but really for retailers specifically, for the fashion industry specifically, we've named sustainability something that it is not. So it is not doing the job that we think it's doing. What sustainability has become is just simply more consumption. So it's not doing the job of regeneration, of building capacity over time, of diminished resources. So it's just a misunderstanding of the word. So that kind of gets us into trouble. And Sky and Cecilia can talk more about that.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. We're gonna have to, it went by so fast. I think we could talk for hours. We have about 4 more minutes. So I just want to make sure, and Sky and Cecilia, you can address this question if you want in your closing remarks. But Hilary, do you want to kick us off with the last few minutes of our amazing panel? Thank you so much.
It really has gone so quickly. I'm sad that it's coming to a close, but I look forward to us continuing this conversation beyond. So to close, I'd like to hear from you all. What would you like us to remember about you or your projects, and or what's next for you? Y'all are graduating. I'm like over here clapping. I'm so pleased for you. What comes next? What do you want us to remember?
Tara and haven't get like united answers, but for now, I personally feel like I would like people to know we are still working, and Pretty Ugly still bring like event, bring street art to this world, and we want people to get engaged.
And so to do that, you can find us on Instagram. So we're at It's Pretty Ugly Official on Instagram. And that's really where our community centers and where we have projects. And then to collaborate on projects, we're at prettyuglyproject.com. And this work is going to live on beyond this.
Yes, Sarah and I will continue collaborate with school and work with children. We hope we can set up, build a new system in the school in the future. We will continue, keep doing.
Yes, for sure. I mean, although this is the end of our thesis, but not end of our project. And if anyone knows schools or teachers may be interested in this program, feel free to contact us.
Yeah, and for us, because our partner, which is Sedovic, they have a climate change summit in September, and we will do multiple workshops together in that time. And for us, we are thinking overconsumption is like a cold. It goes away, but it doesn't go away forever. And what's more is we don't have to let it go away forever. We need to learn a balance just between the need and wants. So it will help us to live more happiness.
Okay, great. We're going to get kicked out. So I just want to wrap up really quickly and thank everyone for a great discussion this morning and for all the questions, to our fabulous moderator, Hilary Sedovic. If you haven't seen Creative Reaction Lab, go to their website, creativereactionlab.com. They're incredible. Huge shout out to our fantastic thesis advisors, Jeff Franklin, Mari Nakano, Esther Kang, Kara Meyer, Allison Cornan, Natalia Ratterwall, Archie Coates IV. And thank you to our amazing staff, Chessa, Indiana, for making these 2 days happen. It's been incredible. Videos are on our website, dsi.sva.edu, so you can watch and get more information about this panel. We will be posting this, and please jump over to our next panel at 12:15, Race, Gender, Equity, Inclusion, moderated by Razmia Kermani-Fry. We're so thrilled to have her here, so don't miss this one.
Wait, just want to jump in real quick. Thank you to WEAC. Thank you to the Northern Manhattan community for all of just the trust and allowing us to learn from y'all, and just gratitude.
Yeah, and don't forget to listen to the people around you and keep fighting.
Yeah, sorry, the next panel's at 11:15 in my haste. So we'll see you. Thank you. Congratulations, all. So proud of you. Let's give them all a big hand.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. Have a great day.